to another edition of Storytelling on Orchard Street. I'm your host, Pete Salamita. We're in the podcast studios at P&T Knitwear Bookstore, 180 Orchard Street. It's a great bookstore. They have a lot of books to peruse and buy. There's a cafe in the back, and they have events here. You should check it out. My guest today is Dorothy Friedman. She's a widely published award-winning poet and editor of White Rabbit, Downtown Poets, and other collections. Her poetry has been anthologized in over 20 collections, most recently in New York City from the Inside, edited by George Wallace and Maintenance, edited by Pete Colifakes and Cat George. I might have pronounced their names wrong. She's read and performed work at over 100 venues, including the Poetry Project and the Bowery Poetry Club. She's published 3 books of poetry, additional 2 forthcoming later this year. Open-Ended, with drawings by Anthony Hayden, Guest, and As If, and then Press, and a memoir, The Bastard Heirs, about her adventures on the Lower East Side in the 80s. Welcome, Dorothy. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yep. So we chatted briefly before the show, and from our conversation, I was able to discover what a rich creative life you've had. So we have a lot to talk about. You have a lot of, I see you brought a lot with you, books and photographs. But let's first start with your background. You were going to tell me where you were born, but you saved it for the show.
Well, a lot of people think that I am a resident of the Lower East Side because they associate me with the Lower East Side and all the poetry readings and work I've done there for the downtown newspaper. But I actually grew up in Brooklyn.
See, I was going to guess Brooklyn.
Sheepshead Bay.
I thought you were city folk.
And not exactly, but I was actually born, since you mentioned the word born, literally I was born on Welfare Island, which is now called Roosevelt Island.
Oh, okay.
And I begin my memoir with that and mention that I was born among misfits and lunatics.
Yes.
And moved to the Lower East Side where I fit right in.
Well, some people might not know the history of Roosevelt Island, but there were hospitals or asylums.
Oh, you do know about it.
I used to book shows for people living with AIDS in the 90s, and one of the hospitals that I brought musicians to was on Roosevelt Island, Roosevelt Hospital. So I used to take the tram across the water and go there, yeah. Maybe if we could just bring this a little closer to you, because you have
actually,
that's perfect. Awesome.
Yeah, this was actually further back. This was, well, you see, it was originally called Blackwell Island. That was the first, and then after several incarnations, it became Roosevelt Island. Mine was sort of, when I was born there, it was in the 40s, and I begin my memoir with that, actually, The Bastard Heirs. And I have a imaginary creative grandmother in Emma Goldman who was incarcerated there.
Wow. What do you mean imaginary?
Well, I mean, I imagine she's my grandmother.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Because we both were, spent time on that island.
I see.
A lot of very interesting people were incarcerated there, actually, were jailed in, the movie industry and so on and so forth.
Right. So you lived in Bensonhurst growing up?
Madison High School.
Okay.
Yes, that was early. Yeah, my teen years. I went to Madison High School. I can't say I really liked high school very much, except for maybe music.
Right.
I didn't go to a high school of art or music or something like that.
Right.
That would have worked out a lot better.
Were you a musician growing up?
Well, I was an amateur pianist, and I was in the school orchestra playing the violin badly. Nice. But as far as some of the teachers,
they didn't kick you out, so I guess you weren't that bad.
I didn't. I mean, trigonometry just wasn't my thing.
Right.
So.
Right. So when did you discover that you liked to write poetry?
That's a little complicated. I first discovered in junior high school I was writing poetry, mostly lyric poetry, and I had one teacher who was very encouraging on that, an English teacher. And then when I got to high school, I won a contest for political poem.
Okay.
About bigotry. I don't think I really got into it until I took my MFA and took creative writing classes at Brooklyn College with some amazing people like John Ashbery and Susan Fromberg Schaefer and lots of other people.
So Master of Fine Arts, what was your major?
English.
Okay, right. So this is your life, and it's been your life. Because some people, like me, I discovered it later in life. And then some of my guests have been interested in poetry or literature most of their life. What did you do after you got your MFA?
I sat around and twiddled my thumbs. No. One of the pluses of getting an MFA, and one of the reasons I went for it, actually, although I was very encouraged to go for it in poetry, was I wanted to be able to earn some money to help, because I had 3 children and a husband who provided, pretty well, but, we still needed more money to live on. And so apparently you got fellowships if you were in the program, like teaching fellowships at the college. Okay. So I started teaching in the English department in 1977.
Wow, okay. Were you a teacher most of your life? Generally, good part, about 35, 40 years on and off, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Did you find it rewarding?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
I did. I didn't really like teaching freshman composition that much, but I did get to teach literature and several other courses and sometimes poetry.
Right.
But I give my own poetry workshops, so I
see. Okay.
Take up the slack there.
Any of your students go on to bigger and better things as writers? Did they keep in touch with you?
Well, I've had some interesting students, actually. I mean, if you include my workshops. For example, one of our, well-respected, I think, writers who's gotten, pretty far with her career is Sapphire, and she took one of my workshops in poetry.
Wow.
Who's a brilliant political writer, and I published her. She won Year of the Poet when I was an editor at Downtown, the newspaper. And I've had some other students. Denise Duhamel was in one of my workshops. She's doing rather well. And people sometimes take my workshop now. I mean, even if they're fairly moderately established in the poetry world, just to study with me, because I studied with John Ashbery. Right. They say, well, I would like to know more about John Ashbery's poetry, so I'm taking your workshop.
You're still doing workshops?
On and off, I do.
I didn't know that. Yeah. So you sound like you were pretty busy. You had 3 kids. Where were you living at that point?
When I first started going to Brooklyn College, I was living in Mill Basin. I had a house, and I was a very proper, maybe not that proper, but some kind of housewife, or that's pushing it too. But anyway, I was a mother of 3 children, and I was very devoted to my children. And
but you did that, and you were a professor, and you ran workshops, and you were an editor. All of that?
Yes, I co-edited a literary magazine called The Helen Review from Brooklyn College, which featured articles and interviews with lots of interesting people, some of whom have, are favorites of the public now, but are among my favorite creative artists, which include Allen Ginsberg, whom I got to know rather well, and I'd love to talk more about Allen, and Woody Allen, John Ashbery, of course, and many other people.
So you have a deep creative output, and sounds like you were very influential to other people's lives.
Well, we tried. The idea of the Helen Review, which grew out of the Brooklyn College Gestalt, and the writers and people I was friendly with who were brilliant at that point, like Carol Polkovar, for example, a playwright. The idea was we were going to publish a feminist magazine, but we would publish men, but in a lower percentage than women.
Okay.
To reverse that.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of
to tip the scales a little bit.
Those days, yeah.
Okay. How did you make the transition from that to, because you talk about and you write about and you were very big in the scene in the East Village you said the 80s or did you say 70s, 80s?
I just moved from one life to another.
Right.
I went from a fairly quiet life, except for my teaching at Brooklyn College and, out in Mill Basin, Brooklyn, to living in Carroll Gardens at one point, and on the Lower East Side. I just moved, from one lifestyle to another. It's kind of complicated, but I could mention it briefly. It's, let's see. Well, I went from straight to gay, or at least in my mind. I had an 8-year relationship with my girlfriend. Then I went from that to living for 25 years with my partner, Gary Azon, the photographer and photojournalist.
Mm-hmm. Ah.
So it's sort of...
You didn't like to be stagnant, it sounds like.
Evolve.
You like to be, you like to evolve.
So some kind of women's evolutionary journey. I write about it in one of my books called The L-Shaped Room, actually.
Okay. When was that published?
Well, actually, it's still waiting to be published.
Oh, okay. So it's a new book. Did I say that earlier?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh. Okay. Well, anybody out there that's interested in a lesbian feminist collection of poems about a women's journey through the decades, that's my book.
Okay. Well, it sounds like somebody would be interested in that.
But I have new books, other books, so.
Right. Well, how about we're, at the point where it might be nice to hear you read a poem.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll continue the chat about your journey in life.
All right. So, all right. So, so I'll read a couple of poems. These are from my As If collection.
So I know Peter and Cap, but how do you pronounce Peter's last name? I probably butchered it.
Sorry?
In your intro, I mentioned Peter and Kat, and I've met them, but I probably butchered his last name. How do you say his last name?
Do you mean Cat George's?
Yeah. How do you Peter's
Peter
last?
Kalofsky's.
It didn't come. It didn't roll off my tongue.
I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Well, it sounds good.
They're wonderful, wonderful people.
Oh yeah, I like them a lot.
What they're doing.
Yeah, I like them.
I'm actually in their collection. They're coming up tomorrow.
That's awesome.
So I'll begin with these poems, and I have to say though that my As If collection is very much inspired by two people. In this case. Amiri Baraka, who I heard read and was totally blown away by it, and who read for me in a couple of readings in the 80s. So you used to also do your own readings? You were a curator of readings? Sorry?
You were a curator of your own readings also?
Well, I read, people asked me to read in different places.
Oh, no, I thought maybe...
I think I read at the African National Congress reading. I know I read at the Poetics of Peace reading for the America Society, and that one, Amiri Baraka came, if late, and broke up the room with his fabulous poem soundings.
Sure.
So I had the opposite of the academic approach, I guess, to which I had originally been connected to, like Emily Dickinson or whoever, whom I still hold in great regard, but let's just say my vision of poetry was greatly expanded. Okay, so this poem is called People and Dogs, and it was inspired by the people in Tompkins Square Park being thrown out of the park where they were living in Tent City in the late 80s.
Sure, I remember that.
And what they call the Tompkins Square riots and so on. And about a year later, there was a dog park area for the dogs which I love dogs. So, so I've been accused of hating dogs, but I really not only don't, but I love dogs. But I observe that park where the homeless people used to be able to sleep and eat and live was now a costume party area for dogs.
I see.
So I wrote this poem at the time.
Okay.
People and dogs. Dogs have a costume party on Halloween in Tompkins Square Park. The best dressed dog gets a year's supply of dog biscuits. Who are the dogs and where are the people? Why are we able to scoop up dog feces of our pets but not human feces of our neighbors? Why are our neighbors dirty, smelly outcasts and our dogs bought beauty products and condos? This is a poem about people and dogs, about dogs treated as people and people conversely, about the dogs having their day and the people still waiting, those dogs who are not the right kind of people, those people who are not the right kind of people, who must wait outside the park gate. This is a poem in which hope is for canines, not Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens sleep on park benches, on stained mattresses, on St. Mark's Place and Avenue A, and they still do, while dogs are coddled by their masters. We lie down like dogs and get up like people. Who are the dogs and who are the people? And conversely, look, I am a dog. Pet me, stroke my fur, and give me a place to sleep.
Nicely done. Yes. And at that time, you were living in the Lower East Side.
Well, at that point, right, that was in the late 80s. I had rented an apartment briefly on East 9th Street, and I was living there, and I was in the East Village so much, I felt like I was living there the rest of the time.
I see.
Running readings and editing for the downtown paper. I ran readings for the Living Theater, which were quite marvelous with great people.
That's what I tried to ask you earlier, because I don't know you that well, but I've been told that you ran your own readings. Oh, that's what I meant earlier. So you did that for a spell. For how long did you do the readings?
I ran my own readings in a sense. I was a director of programs for the Living Theater, for example, and at ABC No Rio earlier. But it was Judith Molina who was a pivotal force in my life, as well as an inspiration, who I was very close to. And I ran the readings for her in the Living Theater, which was on Avenue B at that point, on East 3rd Street. I should credit her as well as Allen Ginsberg, and so on. And the second poem is definitely inspired by Amiri, so I would say. It's called As If the children in Afghanistan are not our children, as if the marches hadn't already happened, as if we are not echoing Vietnam and Nagasaki, as if we can escape our own brutality, as if the Israelites weren't fleeing to Jerusalem, as if the world weren't coming to an end, as if meditation were the answer, or medication or mediation, as if living simply were the answer, or singing or worshiping Buddha, as if our offspring were not all stunted by the fastidious blends and byproducts of last century's karma, as if battered women and child abuse were really another issue, as if the war at home and the war abroad were separate, disconnected entities, as if changing the TV channel could erase the truth about our complicity in the destruction of the planet, as if the Israelis are not our children, as if the Palestinians are not our children, as if the Rwandans are not our children, as if the Albanians are not our children, as if the Serbians are not our children, as if the elderly were not our children, as if the homeless were not our children, as if we can avoid each other by living in cyberspace, as if email could replace the human connection, as if we could love one another and not go crazy, as if we could love one another and not go crazy, as if we could love one another and not go crazy, as if life is not relentless, as if we could ever be in paradise again, as if the wars will give Trump higher ratings, as if the cartoons were any less violent, as if Trump is only bloodthirsty, territorial, and savage, as if we are all not bloodthirsty, territorial, and savage, as if we could flee to Jerusalem, as if there is a Jerusalem, as if the commencement of the Gulf War on Martin Luther King's birthday were not an appropriate measure of American racism and totally in keeping with everything else, as if the gunning down of Diallo and the brutal rape of Louima were not also totally in keeping with everything else, as if penetration of the enemy were not a male activity, as if the president were a human being, as if the media ever told the truth, as if there will ever be a new world order, as if.
Great. Sounds like it was a pretty recent poem.
It seems to affect people that tell me I should get it around.
Yes, I think so.
Which I have done.
It's very topical. Do you write a lot about social issues?
Some of my work is, but I tend to read those poems more, so I'm associated more with political poetry, but I actually write a lot of other kind of poetry. It's more freewheeling and imagistic, that's inspired by my workings with John Ashbery and postmodern poetry.
How has your poetry changed over the years? Has it?
Well, my aesthetics have changed. I've become a little more broad-minded about poetry, I think, and what I hear. I still really like, poems that are a little more enigmatic or that you have to think. I like Robert Frost, who's a little more complicated than he seems at first. For example, wrote short poems. I gravitate towards shorter poems, actually. And I've been publishing a lot with the Brevitas group, which is a short poem group. I have a new collection called Open Ended.
It's 14 lines, am I correct?
That's supposed to be, technically it's 14 lines, yes. So.
Do you like that challenge? Because that's, to get out a cognate idea in 14 lines?
I guess, but like me, I'm a little rebellious, so I don't keep to it anyway. Sometimes my poems vary in length.
I see.
Some people only send in like 3 or 4 lines, and some send in 20, but most try to keep within the framework
of it, right.
Of what they're, instructed. I do sometimes.
Right.
But.
So maybe I'm curious just if you could give like what your idea or what you think the New York City, but in particular Lower East Side, was like when you in the 80s, because I think it's so different now. And I have had guests talk about it and read their poetry about it. I was just curious if you wanted to just, because if somebody's listening and they're younger, maybe if I just wondered if you could give them an idea of what it was like to you.
Right.
From a.
I don't know how many of you, although, I mean, she really does get around, so you probably, have heard Penny Arcade sound off in a good way about the changes in gentrification and all that, about the Lower East Side and how it's disappeared and no longer exists. It's just, I don't know, a lot of the old places are gone, and it's become much more commercial.
Right.
To sum it up.
And certainly less affordable. But I mean from like an artistic standpoint, I mean there was a lot going on, right? Like, and you were a part of
right.
Like music and poetry and dance and
right.
It was pretty art. It was pretty thriving from a cultural standpoint, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was more involved with the art scene and the poetry scene than the music scene, but absolutely. I could read a little excerpt from this copy of Mudfish that Jill Hoffman puts out called What We Left Behind.
When was that published?
Sorry?
When was that book published?
Oh,
Is it recent or?
it's a magazine, but
Okay.
but I have a memoir selection in it, so this is part of my memoir, The Bastard Heirs.
Okay.
I think it was about 3 or 4 years
I
ago.
see.
I don't have the exact.
That's
date.
okay. Just a
But,
ballpark.
Anyway, okay, so I mean, it gives you a little flavor of what
What it
the
was
Lower
like.
East Side, my relationship to the Lower East Side.
Perfect.
What we left behind. I wore a red beret on my head, tilted a little to the right side, black satin pants and bright red lipstick, sunglasses perched on the bridge of my nose, concealing half my face. I was often masked this way and looked hipper than I was, though from an outsider's vantage point, I guess I was pretty hip. But I don't think I'm part of a cool scene, a cool crowd of people. I guess I thought it was all very interesting and all sometimes very sad. We were clowns and purveyors of the culture, snake charmers selling illusions. And now, if you have time to look back at what and who you were then, there's nothing much else to do but write about it. In the 80s, we wore lots of black leather and threw ourselves into orgasm, and death came easily to some, especially those who died of AIDS, like Keith Haring and David Wojnarowicz. We watched some of our friends pass on and recorded it in newspapers and journals. You were a devil man right on the edge of everything trendy, Gary, and you photographed some of the prettiest people at art openings, like Warhol, Basquiat, and so on, the beautiful people, some of whom overdosed, like Basquiat, and we hung out at underground clubs at art openings with Andy, Jackie Curtis, Taylor Mead, as well as art critics and journalists like Walter Robinson and Carlo McCormick. Black leather, death, overdoses, AIDS, terrible and glamorous all at once. This is where we lived. Obviously, our reputations were not unblemished. We were both insidious players and mystic canonizers of a generation. Suddenly, someone sits down beside me, and when I hear him speak, I realize it's Tiny Tim, and then it's Norman Mailer, and finally Joe Franklin, and then Allen Ginsberg, who was always there, handing out copies of his poetry books for reviews or publication in downtown, the newspaper Gary and I worked for. Allen had retained some of his edge, despite the fact that he was a Professor Ginsberg now. He wore a suit and taught at the MFA program at Brooklyn College. Who I was to Allen was never completely clear. On the one hand, I was an editor who could publish his poems, and on the other, I was the ghost of his mother Naomi, delusional Naomi, whom he had institutionalized and given shock treatments. I guess I looked like her a little, because when he talked to me, it was as if Naomi was there, and he was really talking to her. At other times, he was the patriarchal, adult Allen, a dominating presence, in charge of the show and on top of the situation. He would veer back and forth between small boy and super Allen, king of the beats, and once berated me in front of the Living Theater for not holding a camera correctly when I was taking a photo of him and Hanan Resnikov. You never knew which Allen you would get, but it was always worth the trip. Well, let me tell you this one. Anyway, here's an anecdote. Once Allen sat next to me and held my hand. It was at Brooklyn College after I had interviewed him in Boylan Hall in his office, and he had told me about his imaginary cunt, quote, and that he envied women having one. I was interviewing him for a magazine I co-edited called The Helen Review. Our theme for the issue was perversions, and this fit right in with his response to man-boy relationships, which he said were so natural and unassuming. He also talked about his planet dying of AIDS by the end of the 20th century and the assassination plots by the FBI and the CIA, as well as what we had done to destroy the planet. Thus, the 80s began with these surreal moments with Allen and ended with my work for the Living Theater and active participation in the Tompkins Square riots with artists, squatters, hippies, and homeless. I could go on about Alan indefinitely, actually, I suppose. I still dream about Alan. I dreamed about him last night again.
Right. That had a lot of history in there. And when in the beginning of it, you said there was a sadness, and I was wondering what you meant by that. Is it because a lot of the people that you knew were dying from AIDS?
Which part?
So early in what you just read, you said there was a sadness there.
Oh, right, because our friends were passing on.
Right.
Some of our friends.
Yeah.
I mean, Keith Haring, who we knew pretty well, actually. Gary did a lot of photographing of Keith. It's at the Tompkins Square Library now, and
is his photography still viewable at the Tompkins Square Library?
Gary's photo show is up in the front of the library.
Okay, how much?
Includes a large photo of Keith Haring. I believe it was taken at the Pyramid Club.
Is this permanent, or is it just
I'm not actually. It was supposed to be a briefer stay, but it seems to be the last time I was over there. It was still
there.
Up. So
Okay.
as far as I know, it's still there.
Right. Are there books of his photography? I would imagine, right?
Of whom?
Gary.
No, unfortunately,
No.
but there should be, and hopefully there will be.
Right. Well, yeah. Maybe we should make that happen.
He did get. He did do a few interesting things, to say the least. For one thing, he put together a collection called the Midnight Review, which was a collector's edition of a large gold, not the typical size of a book, and he had Museum of Modern Art. It was so beautifully laid out with design and different artists, and William Burroughs was in it, and Keith Haring, and so on and so forth. So he had the museum take a copy of it, so they have it now.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think young people, unless they're really big on history, would understand the impact AIDS had back then, because it wasn't just like a typical illness.
Oh, you mean AIDS?
AIDS, yeah. You know what I'm saying? It had first, there was so much surrounding it. People got shunned for having it.
Right.
People were afraid to be near people that had it.
Right.
And especially in the early days, people died pretty quickly from it.
Right. Well, I guess
So
it's not comparable exactly, obviously, but you could compare it to COVID,
Yeah,
I guess, for one thing.
to some degree, except there wasn't the social stigma of COVID. Like, AIDS had a
Right.
social stigma. Because when I was doing the hospital shows for people with AIDS, there were a lot of people in the hospitals that didn't have visitors. Maybe they were shunned because they were gay, or they were drug addicts, and their
Right.
family kind of forgot about them. So it was a very different thing. It's kind of hard to describe to somebody who's in their 20s, right? And it sounds like it impacted your life quite a bit, because you knew a lot of people that you lost a lot of friends and artists.
In the early
Yeah.
in the early 80s, definitely,
Yeah.
yes. And there are some. If you want to not be exact about the comparison, one of the things that comes to mind is probably not what you had in mind, but I'll say it anyway. Is with COVID. I don't know if elderly people. I don't know if shunned is exactly the right word, but they were ignored at hospitals, and
Correct.
they weren't given respirators,
Right.
and they were passed over because of their age,
Right.
and left to die.
Sure, that's a good comparison.
Well, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, the world has changed, so much in terms of, many forms of activism. Obviously, Black Lives Matter, gay movement, and
Right.
everything. So
Uh-huh.
it's very different.
Were you an activist at all?
When?
Well, back then, when you were younger, when you were here and part of this creative scene.
Like I said, I actually became politicized more from my connection with the Living Theater and Judith Malina and her pacifist politics, such as protesting in front of institutions that were about to execute people and do the Not in My Name
Right.
play, for example.
Maybe describe what the Living Theater is for people who might not know.
Well, Living Theater was founded by Julian Beck and Judith Malina. I believe it was in the 50s, and they were, a very active political group that protested against war and the death penalty and so on. They had a theater on East 3rd Street where they presented magnificent plays, experimental and political theater. Allen Ginsberg was there for a benefit that I was involved with, for example, and so many other fine poets. But the play that was most memorable to me was The Body of God, which was not experimental or intellectual. It was very visceral. And homeless people from nearby shelters were brought in to perform with the actors and do a totem together.
Wow.
They formed a totem at the middle of the stage, and they told their harrowing stories. Some people told of others that didn't survive the winter, for example.
Wow.
It was all very gritty, very real.
Visceral.
Sorry?
Visceral.
Visceral.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very memorable.
Was that a one-time thing, or was it something that was seen more than that?
Well, I mean, it was performed more than once,
Right.
but I mean, not for
Short
for
run.
weeks and weeks.
Yeah,
They
right,
usually
right.
had a short runs
Right.
of plays there, actually. And I believe Hanan Resnikov and the cast wrote the play. They, had the concept. And then the Living Theater, of course, was an amazing group of really kind, generous people who managed to be artists and still really reach out and care about each other. They were a very loving company, I thought. They had people sleeping in the basement who didn't have a place to sleep, like John Farris, a poet. They just did things, that I didn't experience anywhere else, and I was so inspired by their example, and by Judith Molina in particular, who was a quite brilliant intellectual woman, as well as an actor, they say now. So, who made Hollywood films as well as others. And actually, Judith said I never wanted to make the movie The Addams Family and play the grandmother, for example, but I did it to make money for the theater.
Nice.
So they tended to do the commercial things occasionally to make enough money to keep the theater going.
Right.
They only kept that space for 3 years, and then they came back again, and they were on Clinton Street. But it's...
I'm taking that it's no longer around?
No, Judith passed away. Julian had passed away years and years before.
I see.
Actually, the issue that Gary put together, the Midnight Review, was dedicated to Julian Beck, who was... I can't even describe him. He was just so amazing. I called him the sun god. It almost seemed like rays of sun radiated from him when he spoke or was just stood in a room. Everything radiated positive energy around him. He was just a very fine person, I think. I didn't really get to know him very well, but I wish I had. But I knew Judith very well.
Right.
She definitely inspired my political writing.
Did you keep journals over the years?
Sorry?
Journal. Did you have were you a person that did a journal to remember all this type of?
Did I keep a journal?
Yeah.
Not really.
No. So what you're doing this memoir, where is it? It's just you're just pulling memories. It's not something that you. Did some of your writings inform the memoir?
Well, it was suggested to me from a memoir workshop that I was going to that Jill Hoffman gives that I include some of my poems here and there and photographs, probably from Gary's collection, like of the Tompkins Square riots or whatever it happens to be, that kind of thing.
Right.
It's somewhat freewheeling and free associative, like a lot of my writing, actually.
Right. So you said it's in progress. How far along are you?
It's hard to say. I'm working on my poetry collections right now, but I do go to a group once a month who seems to love my memoir writing, so I like to go back there. They're very, positive, and they really like what I'm reading. Right now I'm working on a section. The latest section that I'm working on is about finding Gary Azon's body. We lived together for 25 years, and I found his body in the room next to mine where he slept. And what that was about. And
That must
about
have been
his
traumatic.
funeral.
Was that that must have been very traumatic?
Sorry?
I said that must have been very traumatic.
Oh, it is
Yeah.
very traumatic. I still imagined him, and I still do sometimes imagine him in the apartment with me, drinking out of mugs and talking to me, and so on and so forth.
How long ago was that?
He died in 2007,
Okay.
so that's a while back.
It sounds like he had a very big impact on your life.
Oh, absolutely. Gary, yeah. Anyway, some people have suggested I begin the memoir with his funeral, actually. They call it Performance Funeral. So I'm thinking that will be a section of the memoir. Because when he died, his, funeral was at the Ortiz nursing home, the Ortiz funeral home, rather, on First Avenue. And a lot of people came to
I
it,
bet,
from
yeah.
the local people like Judith Molina and Penny Arcade, Taylor Mead, lots of folk. Phoebe Legere got up at the end and she did a Native American chant, which was very poignant, and that sort of thing.
Right. You talked about Taylor Mead when we were outside having coffee.
Yeah, Taylor, he's a trip. Oh,
Do you feel like talking about that?
oh, lots, yeah, always. I always feel like talking about Taylor, actually. I was looking for, this is actually, one of the, I don't know if you can see this, but one of the White Rabbits was dedicated to Taylor Mead. That's the magazine I put out on and off.
Can I see it
stapled
real
together.
quick? Yeah.
So Taylor used to live around the corner from here on Ludlow Street. He lived at 163 Ludlow Street, and he describes himself as the son of Andy Warhol, whom he talks about quite disparagingly in some of his writing.
Why is that?
I think
He was in his
because-
movies, right?
Well, Andy, according to Taylor, shortchanged his actors a lot, and he was very cheap. And I guess, I don't know, should I use the word exploited? I don't know. It's a strong word. Some people think he exploited some of his actors. But in terms of Taylor, he was, I guess, cheap daddy or something, like, figure. And Taylor was a magnificent person, though. I really loved him. He performed by throwing his papers on the floor haphazardly as if by accident. He was just so improvisational and so funny, and he would play a radio while he read his poetry, and it was always a trip.
What would he play on the radio? Songs or news or whatever came up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was very free associative.
Right.
That's what I liked. I liked his spontaneity, his, comedic timing. He was just brilliant at what he did. And a lot of people try to be that, but they don't quite make it to me as much as Taylor did. Once he threw his cane, he was using a cane by then, so he was elderly or older. I guess he was about late 70s maybe.
Okay.
And he was at the Poetry Project at the New Year's reading, and he threw his cane into the audience. Okay. And then he put his hands up in the air and he said, I can walk, like it was a telethon or something. Right. And the whole audience burst out laughing.
Right.
Suddenly everybody really livened up from an afternoon of poetry, which was good poetry, but it wasn't Taylor.
Right, but he added a little zing to it.
Yeah, he had a entertaining shtick. Yeah.
Right. I guess a lot of this stuff that you're talking about was not ever recorded, right? Because back then it was harder for people to record events, and like now everything's recorded.
Sure that was recorded. I'm sure I don't have the recording,
right.
but the Poetry Project would have all that.
Oh.
He performed regularly for the Poetry Project.
Talk about the Poetry Project, because some people might not know what that is.
Poetry Project, let's see. So I read there a few times. So for New Year's, I read there. I read there for Valentine's Day. There have been a lot of great people associated with the Poetry Project. They really were considered, the home for experimental poetry.
Where's it located?
New York School poetry for a very long time. And I believe Anne Waldman and Allen Ginsberg, on some level, were founders of the project, and many other really, really great people. And the project continues with a lot of younger people.
Nice. How far back does it go? Like, what's the history of it?
How far? Oh, well, I only got to the poetry project in the late 70s. I was busy at Brooklyn College getting my MFA. I experienced a few people like Paul Violi and a few fine poets over there and a few of the free workshops. They had free workshops then.
So it's a long history. It's a long history. It's at least 50 years, right?
Oh, well, I've always had a lot of respect for the poetry project. Well, John Ashbery was one of their favorite poets, and Allen Ginsberg. So they both, in their different ways, inspired them creatively. Yeah. Allen was just amazing the way he would come to the poetry project and sit and listen to the younger poets. And he wasn't reading; he would just come, and support younger poets.
Right.
And, yeah, I met Patti Smith there once backstage. She was busy preparing for a New Year's Day reading, but she didn't speak to me. She was too busy.
Right. But she was there. You were there.
She was there. She was performing. So I said, well, I performed on the same stage as Patti Smith.
That's great.
But I did get a chance to speak to her. I once asked her if she would perform at the Living Theater, and she said, I only perform at the Poetry Project.
I see. Okay.
That's what she said at that point.
Okay.
So, yeah, great. Just John Giorno was a wonderful poet, performer, and I met him there, and a lot of very terrific people.
Well, you have a lot of great memories, so your memoir would be very interesting to read. I hope you finish it.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to include more about the art scene in it right now and the clubs, which many people have written about, like Area and Danceteria and all those kind of places.
Yep.
A lot of celebrities went there.
Did you do art yourself?
Sorry?
Were you ever an artist yourself?
By an artist, you mean a visual artist?
Yeah.
Oh, never.
Oh, okay. But you were around a lot of artists, obviously.
I love to go to the openings, the art openings with Gary, And he wrote, Gary Azon, he was the art critic at that point in the downtown paper. I enjoyed hanging out with the artists more than the poets, actually.
Huh.
It was,
Because it gave you a different worldview.
Different milieu.
Right.
They always thought you were going to write about them, so they were friendly.
Right. How about if you read another poem?
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'll sort of read these two together. This would still be part of the As If collection, the political poems. So this is called Tompkins Square Park, and I believe it's in a couple of anthologies, like The Unbearables published it, I know. Tompkins Square Park. We opened the gate at Tompkins Square Park and let the homeless back in. The music of 1988, the Living Theater is over on Avenue C and East 3rd Street performing The Body of God with actors and homeless people from nearby shelters around the corner. And in the lobby is the soup kitchen. And also on East 10th Street and Avenue C, about a block from the Life Cafe, which used to be on the corner of East 10th Street near Tompkins Square Library. It was the year of It's Our Park, Not Your Park, and it's a class war. Skinheads are screaming at yuppies about what to do with the paintings that cover the park, cement floor with graffiti, and Bible Joe and John the Communist are yelling, it's a fiery hell. But it was just another art opening. Tompkins Square Park, 1988, artists and squatters are painting the park. When kicking over dandelions and derelicts come the police. The wind blows the homeless into a field. Artists and squatters are painting the park. When kicking over dandelions and derelicts come the police. The wind blows the homeless into a field. It takes them in and gives them a temporary home. Here in New York, they are as easy to leave and forget as human bones often are, discarded like the elderly, their shopping bags and pillows, their bags and tents. Bonfires lit the trash cans, dot the landscape. We called it Tent City. Shout, it's our park, not your park, as the cops bashed our heads in. Just another art opening, tattoos and skinheads, kids from Hoboken and Scarsdale throwing beer bottles at the cops, yippies and artists, all facing up with the police. When we try to open the gates, our blood spills out onto the pavement as the cops beat us down. You say you want a revolution. Well, our park had its own battlefield. We had our photos taken with the police, hung flags over the drinking fountain that said freedom. And I could combine that with another poem. This is short. It's called Money. Money. Everything is made of money. The sky sheen is platinum, the October leaves are bronze, the farmhouse windows are glazed in crystal. Nothing goes on that is not money. The supper hum from the houses, it is about money. The hero moving past the dirt roads to the tennis courts, he is about money. All the automobiles are gleaming with it. The poem, in which the hand is a blue flower, the words are a screen, it is about money. 2, let's find out what is the great success and move on. It is not being born in America or the shape of the wind on white curtains. It is not money, old friends, or the sun. It is not the history of ideas. The great success is not he married her and they ate lobster, or the sunny sides of eggs and perfect teeth. As usual, you'll get no answer at all, and there are no history books to refer to. We just come as close as we can and move on. And 3, money never has to take a sandwich for lunch. Money never cries, forgets things, or flounders. Money will not save marriages or rotten novels. It will merely twist them into shape. Money is a postcard from the other side of the imagination. It's the aquamarine in the fake sunshine. Money has perfect knowledge of the world. It never cries, puts up with, or stretches. It never finds itself silly. Money never has to become arrogant or loving or grow gray. Money is, oh poet, the true God. Or money is, oh God, the true poet. You choose the last line. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're getting towards the end of the show. Have we not covered something you'd like the listeners to know about your life, your poetry, or what you've done in the creative world?
It's hard to say which, but I put this in the Taylor and Mead White Rabbit, and it's sort of my opinion of trying to mesh meaning, trying to say something that you want to say with free association, and it's just a line that I thought reminded me of Taylor also.
Okay.
The line is, my brain is broken, but sometimes it goes to heaven. So I have a collection called Open Ended, which we didn't get to, but let's see. But it is a new collection, and I hope you will tune in, same time, same station, or maybe it'll be a different station, actually.
So how can the people who are listening or watching this find your poetry?
That's a good question, because a lot of the books are out of print, but let's see. Well, they can just look online. Possibly Poets House will have some collections. Okay. So, and there are a couple of, I could end with a few short poems.
Okay, sure. We have time for a couple of short ones. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a cabaret outside in the cafe. It's kind of bleeding through the microphones.
Right. Well, my open-ended collection has many of short freewheeling poems that I call freewheeling, but I think you can definitely find meaning in them if that's what you're concerned about. So they're not like that. Some are dedicated to John Ashbery. Okay, this is called Parts of the City. Parts of the city are always dropping off the edge, along with my glasses, which makes you think it's difficult to see clearly. But if you're an art historian, it's all in the frame. In an act of faith, take responsibility for everything, including yourself. Something worthwhile will surely show up as we work out this conundrum, because children come and go, and that's all we have, you know. These bisexual training bras and traumas. Birth parents here, parabolas there, one another's organs and paradoxes dropping in like landlords from the sky. And, well, I would like to end with a poem dedicated to John Ashbery.
Sounds great. Sounds good.
I can do that last poem?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Falling into postmodernity, to John Ashbery. We thought that language had died when a shelf named John broke out from its peer group in symmetrical rows and refused to buckle down to the gray walls which dictated the shape of inanimate objects. "Hey," said the wayward shelf, "don't hang on to those gray walls as if that's all there is to anchor you to eternity. There's more to explore. Let go of your inhibitions and soar above the closets of hung-up coats." A shelf had wanderlust. The idea caught on, and soon all the shelves were rattling on their hinges. Eventually, all the chairs and tables were flying around the room. Before animation was sterility, we moved on stiff hinges till John showed us that all ways were the right way and invited us to the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. So we followed John down the rabbit hole and fell into post-modernity. Thank you, John Ashbery.
That's a great way to end. Dorothy, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I've learned a lot about you and the vibrant scene that you were a part of. I thank you for taking the time to come here.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So,
thank you very much for having me.
Yes.
Wonderful.
So, you've been listening to Storytelling on Orchard Street with my fascinating guest, Dorothy Friedman. Dorothy Friedman, August. Anyway, thanks again, Dorothy, and thank you all for listening or watching, however you're enjoying this podcast. Storytelling on Orchard Street at the P&T Knitwear Bookstore Podcast Studios. Thank you all, and bye-bye.